It's not a surprise, my eyes light up when you're around. I'm awake, beating heart, you know, I know, gotta start making dreams, taking flight, gotta show the world it's gonna be alright. It's gonna be alright. It's gonna be alright. It's gonna be alright.
Welcome to the Quantum Alignment Q&A, Humboldt Series, where we traverse through an array of healing modalities to educate, empower, and excite our listeners on their path of holistic health and wellness. In sharing various practitioners' experiences and insight, we hope to cultivate a deeper relationship between one's true self, the mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional bodies. Join Naturopath, Transpersonal Psychologist, and Cannabis Therapy Consultant Dr. Hernandez in the Humboldt Quantum Alignment Series. And now, here is your host, Dr. Hernandez.
Welcome, and thank you so much for taking time to be present with us today. I have a beautiful, amazing guest that I am so excited about having her here, Sabrina Ourania, I hope I said that right, she'll say it for me later, is a local astrologer, menstrual and reproductive health practitioner, a Yoni enthusiast, which I think that we all are, and transformational retreat leader. Hello, welcome. You look gorgeous.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here right now.
This coat is like phenomenal.
I literally just got it 2 weeks ago in a clothing swap exchange where my girlfriend was like, I've been saving this because it's meant for you. So
oh my God.
I feel super, super grateful.
It's incredible. It's like a faux fur, right? But the inside, let me see the lining. Oh my gosh, it's like a peach lining or something. It's incredible.
I'm all about being cozy and comfortable. So,
yeah, I love it. I love it so much. I gave you a hug and it was just a little bit of a long hug because you just feel so
you can give me another one
wonderful.
For sure. Yeah.
So how is everything? How are you doing?
I am having a rebirth right now, which I guess is always an amazing thing. But, you know, the birth canal, the birth process is not always the easiest to get through. So it has been a real time for me, as I think it's been for a lot of people right now in this time. I don't know when this is going on air, but I know like in this moment, in this past week, so much has been coming up for people and specifically women and being re-triggered by a lot of sexual trauma in the world. And so I think we're all really feeling that. And so I'm here saying me too, also very strongly feeling it, and then being support and advocate for other women that are going through that right now, women and men.
Yeah. What an amazing space that you hold. Tell us, one, how you say your name.
Oh, yeah, that's
because I wanted to say it properly.
Sure.
I did some research before you got here. But tell me how you say it.
So my name is Sabrina Ourania.
Oh my God, that's so much better than I said it.
And actually, Ourania is not my last name. It was my middle name.
Oh, okay.
But I've felt very connected to this name. And, you know, middle names don't really get used. And I was like, this is actually a name of power for me. So I want people to speak it and I want it to be used. So my ancestry is mostly Greek, and my grandmother's name is Ourania. So traditionally in Greek culture, your children are named after your parents. So my middle name is Ourania. My sister has the feminine version of my grandfather's name as her middle name, Konstantina. And Ourania comes from the Greek word Uranos, which means heaven, sky. Uranos was the father sky, counterpart to Gaia, Mother Earth, right? So Ourania means heavenly one, but she was also the Greek muse of astrology, which having that in my namesake has kind of always led me down this path to the work that I do. So
okay, that makes so much sense in what you do, because before we began, we were talking about the two different avenues that you serve our community, which we'll get into in a moment. And then you were like, well, I don't know how they kind of come together sometimes. Now it makes perfect sense. So tell the listeners a little bit about what it is that you are doing in our community, and then we'll go, some other places.
Sure, yeah. I'm a practicing astrologer. I have been practicing astrology as a profession, originally kind of part-time, but now I'm doing this, more as my main source of income for about 7 years now. Yeah.
Congratulations.
But I've been, thanks. But I've been studying it for much, much longer. And people are always like, when did you first get into astrology? And I don't really remember when that happened. I think my whole life I was always really interested. I'm like, yeah, I definitely know I'm an Aries, But then I started reading charts in my late teens, early 20s. And, ever since then, I've been sort of understanding the world through the astrological lens. And it's the language of archetypes being the primary language that I think I perceive reality in, maybe. So I see clients for astrology readings, both in person, locally here. I've also been doing it online, because I travel a lot. And so I've been seeing many clients online. And then we just started doing a monthly event called an Astro Salon at the Arcadia Healing Arts Center, which is a little bit about what's going on astrologically in the upcoming months. We talk about the lunations, the full and new moons, so people can kind of get that download for what that's all about. But also I'm encouraging people to come with their own charts and be able to ask questions, and for all levels of, people who are just enthusiasts or, are total novices that don't really know anything about astrology, but would like to know how these transits apply to them. So we're really excited about that. Thanks. It's happening tomorrow night, actually, at 7:00 at the Arcadia Healing Arts Center.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So if people were to tune in with you and check it out, can they find that through the Arcadia Healing Arts website, or will you give us information later on your social media sites?
Sure, yeah. It'll be on my social media sites. It's also through the Arcadia Healing Arts Center Facebook page as well.
Thank you for doing that. That sounds amazing. Do you want to go? Let's go. Okay, cool. So Kendall and I are going. We're going to go. Tell me a little bit more about the other things that you're doing as well, because you're doing quite a bit. Yeah.
Gemini rising. I can't get away from it. Yeah. Okay. Jacqueline of all trades sort of thing. So I work as a menstrual fertility and reproductive health coach. And that's really the work that's come out of my own personal healing journey. So whereas with astrology, it's like been a passion that's been ongoing my whole life, this really was born from my own kind of health and wellness struggles, which I think is true for a lot of people who come into the healing arts world. Is a lot of it is just from their own personal journey, and then being able to share the healing that they've experienced. And so I was diagnosed with polycystic ovarian syndrome about 8 years ago now, maybe 8 or 9 years ago. And I was that diagnosis can be really terrifying for women, especially from coming from the Western perspective, where it's an uncurable, I'm making little air quotes. Yeah. And that, you may be infertile. And so if you ever want to have kids, you might need synthetic hormones, or, this means that you're
slippery slope of fear.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So, that led me to, I basically was just like, no, forget that. I don't really buy into this. And I want to find another answer. So, I went and got a master's in health and wellness coaching, specifically focused on endocrine health and really wanting to understand my reproductive system and how I could heal myself. And I had incredible results. And I'm like, wow, this is not information that enough people have access to. And I really want to share that. So I do coaching with women around that, specifically if they've been diagnosed with PCOS or endometriosis. Those are big ones I get. I work a lot with women who have been on birth control for a very long time and have not really even had experience having a sort of regular, normal cycle, and who are trying to get off birth control and try to become fertile. And so aside from doing that in coaching and talking about diet and herbs, I also offer Yoni Steam treatment therapies for women. And I'm a big proponent of Yoni Eggs, which I also sell here locally and teach women how to use. And I did a 5-week this summer called Yoni Yoga, where I was teaching women how to practice Yoni Yoga. But I'm hoping to teach more Yoni Yoga classes and workshops locally.
Wonderful. That was about 15 things that I want to dive deeper into while we have a few moments. So tell me a little bit more about Yoni Steams and Yoni Eggs. And for the listeners who have no idea what those two things are, can you explain them in a little bit more depth?
Sure. Yeah.
Depth.
I should probably just define Yoni. I mean, I feel like for our listeners, probably it's a more well-known term, but I think in general, Yoni is a newer term to be introduced into the West. So yeah, a Yoni is the idea of the entire female reproductive system, but not just the feminine anatomy of it, but really everything that represents, and the sacredness of everything from the outer to the inner, the womb space as well. With Yoni steaming, that is a practice that I was introduced to that really made a difference for my healing journey with PCOS, because the vaginal wall is so absorbent, the tissue there is so deeply absorbent, that if you are steaming herbs, you get the volatile oils that come in through the steam and actually absorb immediately into the bloodstream and into the body, but directly to where they really need to be delivered if we're trying to regulate hormones, or, support women with all types of different reproductive health issues. And then also just as a regular self-care treatment. You don't need to have some serious diagnosis to want to do a Yoni steam. I remember my first Yoni steam, I went to a Korean spa this is back when I was living in the DC metropolitan area, and there's a big Korean community. And Yoni steams are known as chayuk in the Korean culture, and they utilize them very frequently. So I was really excited to go check this out. And I remember immediately feeling my vagina more relaxed than it had ever been. And I was like, I didn't realize that I had such a stressed out, tied up vagina. I didn't know until it was so fully relaxed. I was like, this is amazing. I didn't know I was holding so much stress and tension there. So yeah.
Wow.
That was pretty life-changing for me.
Yeah, I would imagine. So what type of herbs do you suggest? I mean, I make the Periglow pouches, and I have my specific herbs that I put in there for women, and they can use that for steaming, or they can use that for a topical. But do you, in your classes and obviously in anything else that you do you suggest a particular type of herbs, and will you give us that recipe now? You don't have to, but I mean, if someone was starting and they wanted to do it.
Sure, yeah.
When I make an appointment with you, they couldn't come to you.
Right. When I'm seeing clients, I am custom creating formulas for them based on what they've got going on. But I have a selection of herbs that I'm traditionally using and working with. And so I'll create a custom formula for them based on that. And what it is that they're looking to do, right? If they're trying to increase their fertility, or in the case that a woman has just recently had a miscarriage or an abortion and is wanting to kind of cleanse the area both physically, but also energetically. But I do actually, at Moonrise Herbs here, they have a facial steam blend.
Yes.
And it's made for facial steaming, but actually I often use it as my base that I'm then adding other herbs to, because it's really gentle. So I think for any woman that wants to try a Yoni steam herself who hasn't had one, that would be a really great blend. And that's, chamomile, lavender, calendula. It's just super, super gentle. I think rose petals are in there too. Yeah.
Nice.
So really gentle.
What do you think about
herbs
comfrey, witch hazel, those kind of things as well?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Yeah, good. Wonderful. We have a place for someone to start. Can you tell our listeners about what the Yoni egg is? And to some people, that may be completely new information. How would you introduce it?
Yeah, so this is a practice that comes from ancient China. The empresses and the concubines of the royal palace were taught in practices of Chinese Tantra. And so that was where the egg was introduced. And traditionally it was made of jade. So we sell jade Yoni eggs. There's also a variety of other stones that women can use. But the idea is to really both cultivate and harness our Jing, or our sexual energy. And so it's an egg, crystal egg that is actually inserted into the vagina and worn for a variety of both physical as well as energetic healing purposes.
I love the Yoni eggs. I think I have probably, I'm looking over at the
There's
ones that I have in my office.
That's the first thing I saw when I walk in. Yeah.
I have them here locally because I sell them to clients, or they adopt them anyways. But I have at home, I think 18 to 20 different stones that have different metaphysical properties. So for example, if I'm needing confidence or courage and I'm, going to do a new project, I'll have a tiger's eye in. If I'm going to a speaking event, I'll have a lapis in.
Exactly.
If I'm wanting to heal a space and I'm going a long period of time without any kind of, with a male or whichever, then I will do a rose quartz. If I'm wanting to really prep my body for something, there's just a reason for each one of them.
Right. And then you develop relationships with them, right?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, you're like, oh, my sweet little. I have this one, while we're on the topic, I have this one that's a smoky quartz, but it has a rainbow in it. I waited for her for 4 years. I manifested.
This is my baby.
I manifested that one. And I waited and I waited and waited. And she came at the right time. I needed, if you know about the smoky quartz with a rainbow, you know what that means. And I needed it, and it came at that moment. And then it's like, my vagina was like,
yeah.
Well, and I feel like singing, dancing.
I mean, we develop relationships with our stones and our crystals, but definitely if we're wearing them internally and we're birthing them as a regular practice, we really have this entirely different level of relationship with them, which is one of the things that I love about the practice of Yoni eggs, because kind of going back to China, the eggs were passed on generationally through the women. So you
Really?
would wear your jade egg and then you would give it to your daughter, at which point she would wear that. And the reason you can do that with
Oh my
jade,
gosh, that gives me shivers. That's cool.
it's so beautiful. The reason you can do that
Yeah.
with jade is because it's a non-porous stone. So it will continue to last, right? Not all stones you definitely would want to share with another person, you know?
Right.
But yeah, that would be kind of carried down through the lineage. And I mean, that's a practice that I would like to revive. I fully
Oh, that's
intend to give my
beautiful.
first Yoni egg to future daughter. So yeah.
I love that. I mean, just the power and the energy that holds, and then you're cultivating. And as far as the Yoni eggs that you mentioned that you sell them in your space, in your sacred space, and or that you adopt them out, right? That's kind of how I see them, as they're being adopted out. What do you think of the stones that you would not suggest to people, as well as, there are a lot of Yoni eggs out there right now, and I just did a whole entire Q&A on it. Which stones would you, or what would you suggest for people that are looking to adopt specifics as far as the covering and the coating of the egg? Because I don't think a lot of people know this depth yet. Right. And this is where I want to go. I want to go deep into this. So just, can you answer those two questions?
Yeah. Well, all the eggs that I use and sell are GIA certified. So I highly recommend getting eggs from a retailer that's going to have their eggs GIA certified. So what that means is that they've tested these crystals to ensure that they are what they say they are. Because when we talk about crystals, we're actually talking about a combination of different elements. And these have the ability to leach their mineral content into our bodies if we're wearing them internally. And not all stones are actually healthy for that purpose. So there might be some awesome gemstones that are great to have on your jewelry, but you wouldn't want to wear them internally. And that they could actually give you toxic levels of particular minerals. So on the one hand, ensuring that the eggs are of the stones that they say they are, and that they are on the list of stones that are safe to be using internally. The other thing that it'd be testing for is whether or not they've been dyed or heat treated in any way. And that's another thing. I mean, oftentimes we're buying stones in stores that, look really beautiful and their colors are really bright and brilliant, but they may have been dyed in some way. And that is definitely a no-no for crystals that we're going to wear internally. Yeah, so you want to make sure you're getting them from a trustworthy, reputable source.
Great. And then what about the coating? What do you think about this?
Like
I haven't asked many people.
How they're packaged, you mean? Or
No, the coating around, because some are crystal quartz coated, some are lacquer coated, some are just raw. I mean, what do you think about that?
Yeah, all the stones that I use are going to be raw. They're not going to have any kind of
coating whatsoever.
Yeah.
Because I don't think people ask these questions. They're just like, oh, that's a pretty Yoni egg and it's bright freaking purple. And you're like, wait, let's back up a little bit.
Just because there's a crystal that is shaped like an egg doesn't mean it's meant to be used internally as a Yoni egg.
A lot of people are going to the internet to purchase their Yoni eggs.
Yeah.
And this is a question, or these are questions that we need to be asking.
Yeah,
right,
I get
as
this
a
all the
consumer.
time at the Yoni Egg course or Yoni Yoga course that I was teaching earlier this summer. Some women had already had eggs. I had eggs there available for sale, but some women were coming with their own eggs, and I found several of them that were really not ideal to be using. One of the women in the class had an opalite egg, and opalite's not a natural stone. It's synthetically made, but involves using some plastic, which I would highly deter. We're really trying to move away from plastic specifically for the negative benefits it can have on our endocrine health. And so to then be taking potentially BPA-ridden plastics that are used to make these synthetic crystals and then inserting them internally could be really harmful. So, yeah.
There needs to be more awareness around these. I'm really glad that you're here for that. So tell me about Yoni Yoga. What is this? This is exciting.
Well, so my background's as a yoga teacher. I don't really teach regularly anymore. But when I got into the practice of using Yoni eggs and the way that really had life-changing shifts for me. But there was, people were buying eggs, but there's not a lot of training on what you do with an egg once you have it, So you could just wear it all the time, which is one way to go about it. But if you want to consciously have a practice where you're cultivating, raising that energy, and this looks like bringing together, yoga methodology as well as ideas about tantra and how we actually cultivate the energy of our sacral womb centers. And also I just think having women spend time where they're really focused in their womb space and womb center and learning how to connect deeply with that area and live from that area and listen deeply to what she needs that's kind of what the goal of, I think, of my Yoni Yoga class is. You know, on the one hand, it's like, it's exciting and teaching you how to use Yoni eggs and build sexual energy and have more incredible orgasms or balance your hormones. But in a big way, I think it's just helping women cultivate a time to just listen to their own wombs, because she is our oracle, and she is a wealth of so much ancestral wisdom and within us, and this guidance that we can tap into at any time. But we don't really have regular practices in which we do that. I mean, unless that's been our own journey and we've cultivated that. And so I think for me, Yoni Yoga is just offering a space for women to come and for an hour and a half that we really drop into our own wombs to listen to the wisdom that we have and that she has to share and that she's been trying to share. And sometimes that trying to share shows up like symptoms because we're not listening.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for holding space and doing something like that for the community to really come to, because that sounds amazing. And have you thought about doing videos and things like that to share with the
that's
the
my learning
world?
curve.
Okay.
That's my learning curve. I'm working on it.
Maybe by the time people are listening, they can find you on somewhere, because that needs to be told. I mean, there are people out there doing videos, but it would be nice to get your approach on it. You have a lot of interesting history and background and a lot of education and a lot behind you, and that sounds like something that you might think about doing. I know I would see.
Yeah,
I would want to see it. I would want to watch.
Thanks for the support. Yeah,
of course. So speaking on all these things, I'm wondering what the most common issues that people are coming to you for, and in what fashion are they coming? I know they're coming as astrology clients, and then people who are coming, for sacral womb health. But are there others? I mean, of course there are others. That ties into everything, right?
It's so interesting because what's coming up when you say that is, as a healer, that when people are coming to you with certain concerns, it's so much a reflection of what, you're also working through in your own way. Yes. Yeah. So, it says a lot when you're looking at the demographic of people that are coming to you for healing about what you're really going through right now and how you can be a reflection for that. So it's changed over time, I would say. Definitely when it comes to the astrology work, people don't come to astrologers when everything is just like peachy keen in their life. So usually it's right on time because they're being triggered by something enough that they're willing to come and see somebody about it. And we see it in their chart immediately. It's just like right there, and what oftentimes when people are being triggered by some kind of like astrological event that's happening, some transit that's happening presently, they are like a focal point in the universe for something that's happening to everyone in a large scale. So this is part of the ways in which like the inner work and healing that we're doing is healing for the collective in a really big way. But that's changing all the time because the astrology is changing all the time. So on the one hand, like there's that. When it comes to the women's health and wellness work, I would say a lot of the things that people come to me for are the big one, I think most recent, is women who are fed up with birth control and ready to get off of it. I think that there's a big movement of women who want to go back to learning how to actually monitor their cycles and their fertility naturally, how to know when they're ovulating. And, this has been a lost art. It's been really stolen, I think, from us. And not that I'm like against the idea of birth control, but I was on birth control myself from 13 to 22, I want to say. And I think that's very true of a lot of my generation. I mean, I wasn't even sexually active when I started taking birth control. I had my first gynecological exam because I just started menstruating. And I was really concerned about my acne. And my doctor was like, oh, well, this helps with that, And as a young woman, I remember feeling like excited. Oh, this says something about me. I have birth control now, But I didn't realize the havoc that it was wreaking on my body and how out of alignment I was with my natural rhythm and my natural flow for so long. And so I'm finding that there's so many women of my generation who the same thing has happened for them and they are wanting to get off of it. But then when they stop, having unmanageable symptoms, everything from, mood swings, acne, actually having other kinds of stuff coming up like being diagnosed with PCOS, having incredible cramping pain, having really irregular cycles. I mean, it's a whole widespread variety of things, but how do we transition out of using this sort of Band-Aid thing that is birth control to then having a healthy relationship with our cycle and then being able to understand our fertility so that we can utilize those principles to get pregnant or not get pregnant as we actually want, instead of doing it in this trickery way that birth control does, where it kind of cheats our body out of its ability to do what it already knows how to do. I think that women are waking up to the wisdom that we carry in our bodies and the ways in which we've sort of impeded that and how we can maybe get some of those things out of the way and listen to what she really has to tell us.
I absolutely fully agree with you. I think the closer we get to that, the more aligned we are with our body, right? And it just, everything starts to make sense from there. I know I've been, oh my gosh, probably 10, 15 years, no birth control, and just doing it in a natural way, a natural method. And I mean, there's a lot of information that we'll talk about during the break in a second that I'll share with you. But I just want the listeners to know there are ways, to be extremely sexually active if you choose, as well as being natural. I mean, because most people think, oh, well, then you can't have, any intimate relations. But that's not the case. There are ways to really track your body. And there's so much empowerment in that, in being able to know when you're going to, release blood, know whenever you're ovulating, know when there's so much power in that.
And when you're
saying yes to intimate relations and no to intimate relations, that's powerful.
When you're feeding your body the right things, when you are supplementing with the right herbs, whatever, your body starts to align with the natural rhythms.
Yes.
And that may be the lunar rhythms too,
Yes.
and we all start to sync up with our sisters,
Yeah.
and then we're a cohesive unity of that also.
Yeah.
I love to think back to tribal societies when the women would all be bleeding together, because it becomes a force of nature, and that was why it was so important for women to have the red tent, or to have ceremonial space that they can go into together to heal and do that work. And I've been a big proponent of that, and that's been a big part of my own personal journey too. I was invited to join a women's new moon hoop ceremony when I was 13 with my best friend. It was a group that her mother had been a part of, and they'd been maybe meeting for about 10 years at that point, every month. And we were the youngest new members to join the group, but it was for all women once they started bleeding, and at any point after. And it was really amazing for me to be, 13 in middle school, that's a crazy period of time. Relationships with other women tend to, or other girls in school are not always healthy. So for me to have this space to come into of mothers and elder women that was just so fully embracing and loving and honoring of our bodies and our wisdom actually really just changed my life. I think that was a big part of leading me down this path to where I am now.
No wonder you are such a confident, strong woman. It started a long time ago. Well, it happens to be that time where we need to take a short little break to give a shout out to a local aligned business that I love so very much, and I believe that you will too. Let's keep talking.
Good love gonna make it, no doubt. Time from above.
The original Paraglow and Paraglow Green are medicinal herbal compresses based on a traditional Swiss formula to promote healing in the first weeks after giving birth. During the amazing miracle of birth, the mother and child perform many physical marvels. The muscles that form the perineum in the pelvic floor are both strong and extremely elastic, and must be so in order to allow the women to give birth. When the perineum is strong, the organs remain firm and healthy. When the perineum is weak, the organs lose cohesiveness. The herbal compresses help relieve any soreness or swelling. They promote the healing of the perineum, including any small tears or incisions closed with stitches postpartum inside or out. The compresses can be applied hot or cold to the perineum and surrounding tissues. For more information, check out paraglow.info. They can be found at Moonrise Herbs, Wild Berries, or Chautauqua. For a full list of other locations, visit our website. Paraglow makes your perineum glow. Hello and welcome back. I am so excited. We kind of spoke about birthstone malas while we took a break. Can you share something with the listeners? Because I don't want them to miss out on what we spoke about, because these are gorgeous.
Thanks. Yeah, this is something I'm really excited about. So going back a minute, when I first started getting into reading birth charts, I wasn't quite ready to start, as I've been studying, I wasn't quite ready to do paid for readings. This was kind of part of my education, but I was trying to teach all my girlfriends about their natal charts, because those are my first charts I'm looking at, right? It was my boyfriend and my closest girlfriends, and those are the charts I'm studying. And I didn't really have all the language tools yet to really describe what I was seeing, but I was so excited about what I was finding and I wanted to share it. So years ago, for Christmas, this was like maybe 12 years ago now, for Christmas, I decided to make birth chart necklaces for my closest girlfriends. So I made like maybe 5 of them that year, and I gifted them to everybody. And I spent time figuring out which gemstones I thought really coordinated with the different planets and the different signs. And I used some traditional rulerships that you could find in other books, but a lot of it was just my personal experience, like what really resonated with this archetype. And anyway, everyone was like, you have to sell these. So for the last like 12 years on and off, through Etsy or word of mouth, I've been selling these necklaces. But now they're this is like the new version of them where I'm making them as a mala form. So as before, it was like a string beaded necklace. These are actually traditionally 108 bead mala. And it actually works out really well because there's 360 degrees in the zodiac. And if you want to have 108 beads, you can just divide that. And so you'll have 9 beads that represent each of the different signs. So mathematically, it's appropriate to be a perfect reflection of your birth chart while also being 108. I feel like it's just perfect. Yeah.
And they're absolutely gorgeous.
Thanks. Yeah. So it's a gemstone necklace that represents your birth chart. So the guru bead's the sun, which is where we started from. And then all of the different beads will represent the different signs of the zodiac. And then we have other beads and that look like the planets actually, where they would fall into your chart. So each one has the same stones, but the way that it's made is specific to each person.
I see.
So it's very personalized. Okay. Yeah.
Well, we definitely will have pictures of those on our social media sites for those of you who are interested, and then we can funnel them your direction if they want you to make. Do you make specific ones for people?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. They're all
Great.
custom ordered. And
Great.
I really feel like it's a great teaching tool for people who are interested in astrology who maybe don't know their birth chart so well, as a way to learn it. Or if you just do and you love astrology, I have my birth chart tattooed on my back. So I'm wearing it in a necklace and it's tattooed on me. I'm kind of like representing it all the time. So, yeah.
Well, I'm putting an order in now. I would like to have one.
Cool.
Please. I'll get it for myself for Christmas. It's kind of early for Christmas, but I'm going to get it for myself.
Yeah.
So I don't know how long it takes to make. So it looks like it takes a long time. But thank you so much for sharing that. Let's move on to what you feel like your life purpose is. I can only imagine we've kind of been talking about so many things. In a few sentences, what do you think that your life purpose is?
I think particularly for my soul's journey, a lot of it is about reconnecting people to how enchanted life and the world is, like the re-enchantment of the cosmos. And I think that's what the language of astrology can teach us. And so being sort of a translator for the planets in the world is kind of how I view myself. But ultimately what it's teaching is that we live in a world full of magic where there's omens and signs and synchronicities all the time. And, astrology really works on the principle of synchronicity. And so that's one way that we can bring that into our lives. So I think I'm here to re-enchant and be a proponent for the re-enchantment of nature in the world. I also feel like, being a woman in this culture, in this day and age, we're liberators. We're really here to support freedom and freeing ourselves. And a lot of that is like self-imposed limitations. A lot of that is oppression that's been here for a very long time. And so I think that as I and as each of us liberate ourselves, we're supporting all the women in doing that. So I feel sort of like this revolutionary cry in my being. And as I continue to find ways to be more fully self-expressed, to break through the illusions of power dynamics, that I'm actually supporting that for the collective.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that piece. I think that's huge. And you're more than welcome to expand on any of those pieces that you want to. Okay. Let's talk about the personal habits or daily rituals that you have for yourself. I know every person, as you become, more potent and more structured and more dedicated, we all start to gravitate towards a particular type of ritual that really helps us. And you must have a long list of ritual that you do for yourself. Do you mind sharing?
Sure, yeah. In a way, it's too long to do every day, right?
Sure,
so
yeah.
I think that that's part of my Gemini rising nature too, is that I like to change it up a lot. I think variety is one big thing, but a consistency of practice, even though I might be employing a variety of different techniques for it. But I would say the big ones in my life, when I was first introduced to yoga, it was breath work above everything else that was making a huge difference in my life. And so I make time every day to do pranayama practice, whatever that may look like in that given day, whatever type of breath work or how long or whatever might vary. But coming back to the breath as a daily practice is really important to me. For me, also dropping into the womb space. Obviously, this is going to be specific for the women in the world that are listening to this. I realize that when I'm living my truth, I'm living from my womb. And all of the confused or fear-based decisions are all coming from up here in my mind. And I think I spent a lot of time working and dropping into my heart, but there's something about the relationship between the truth of the womb and the ability to then feel safe enough to open our heart, because we're really grounded and centered in our womb space. So that's a practice that I do every day, which is coming into my womb and just listening to her. So often it's a visualization where I actually see myself entering into my own womb and just experiencing what I'm seeing there at any given day. Because, obviously throughout this course of the month, that is changing all the time. So what does she look like today? And then I implore her, as the oracle that she is, like what questions I may have that I'm seeking some truth about. And then I listen. And she's so clear. She's really, really clear. And that's really where I think I make my best decisions from.
I love that. And I really love that you explained it in that way, because now it gives our listeners an opportunity to try that on their own if they're female. If they're male, we could suggest that they go into their heart space to do that as well, right? So thank you for that. That's beautiful. Any other personal habits?
Writing. Yeah.
You're like shaking your head, writing.
Yeah. I need to write. That's really important to me. Whether or not it's something that I'm going to share or turns into something that anyone else ever sees, like that's where a lot of my processing and my, happens, is when I'm just allowing myself to just free write whatever wants to come out without judgment. So I do that pretty regularly. I wouldn't say every single day. I wish, but most days I'm writing something. Yeah.
That's wonderful.
And that's beautiful too to look back on. Like I have collections of journals from all through my life. I think a lot of people do, but I think that's really beautiful to sort of have this kind of the whole trajectory of my life all written out, and to be able to go back and say, wow, and like have compassion for the Sabrina at 15 who had really angsty poetry she was writing, or, so.
I like that. I like that a lot. I have small amounts of writing that I've done as far as journaling and whatnot, and it really does capture your time frame, and you can remember who you were. It's
medicine
powerful.
For your future self too.
Yeah.
That's what I found, is like when I've been in places that have been really challenging, often it's my own words from the past that are the most healing and the most soothing for me. I'm like, oh wow, I already knew this. I learned this. Or like, thanks past self, Sabrina, for hooking up future self. You really needed to hear that in this moment. I have poems from the past that are still my daily medicine that I come back to. There's certain lines where I'm like, God, there's so much wisdom in that. Like I didn't even understand it then. But that's why I think words are so powerful too, because they are spells that we weave. So the more that they're said, the more that they're used as a mantra, the more we're really bringing power to them, the more real that they become. So yeah, definitely powerful poetry pieces that I've written before that have come back to me and have become more and more true in more ways than I could have ever imagined, and have brought me a lot of healing, and hopefully to others too, when they get shared.
I'm going to take more time to write. I really am. I think it's amazing, and I love doing it. And I think what I do is I do a lot of affirmation writing, like, making it my reality. I do a lot of that, or gratitude stuff, gratitude journaling. But I don't think that I really talk about what I'm processing.
I'm really into mythology, which makes sense a lot for the astrology work I do. I always come back to the myths because we're living and reliving these stories all the time, and we're activating different archetypal dynamics in our being. So oftentimes when I'm writing, they sort of turn into stories that could sound like a retelling of a myth, or it could sound like a fairy tale, where I might be exploring the aspect of me that maybe is an evil stepmother, and what that looks like, and that journey, or the little orphan girl in me, or whatever that may be. But I often find that these, just as I'm experiencing my process, they often reflect these sort of timeless stories that we find in myths and in fairy tales. It's easy when you have like a good wealth of knowledge around these myths. Like I'm pretty familiar with a lot of, ancient Greek myths and Nordic myths. But even if you didn't, that's just the thing about these timeless archetypes, is that they're already in there anyway, So.
With you saying that, it brings me back to a point that we had earlier in our conversation about archetypes. Mm-hmm. For those listeners who may not know what that is or what they are, could you explain that? Is that okay?
Yeah,
Do you feel comfortable doing it?
Yeah,
in your own words and however you want.
Sure. Yeah. Okay, so I would say that they are characters or personality traits that are timeless, that kind of show up in all cultures and all places. So for instance, we could say the archetype of the mother goddess. You're going to see mother goddess from any ancient culture, and she might be named Demeter, and she might be named whatever, you know. You're also going to see, you know, a powerful archetype of the king or the sky god. Or so the idea is that these are characters that we get in any stories or any myths, and they are all components of us, right? So I see us as being polytheistic beings. We actually are kind of made up of all of these archetypes. They all exist within us to different varying degrees, and some are more developed than others. And that's kind of how I think we sort of liberate ourselves in our full expression, is to actually begin to explore all of these different archetypes within us. Because I think the ones that aren't activated within us are often ones that we project onto other people. And that's where some of that shadow play work comes up. You know, so the more that we can fully embody and feel into the needs and wants of all the different beings within us. And with astrology, like, that's kind of the way that I go about doing it. You know, we each have a Pluto in our chart. We each have a Mars in our chart. We each have a Saturn in our chart. And they represent these different parts of us. And I see them as the different archetypes within our being. You know, there's a reason why the planets are all named after gods and goddesses. Mm-hmm. So, how are we listening to and hearing the needs of our Saturn and honoring that in some way? And if we're not, that's when we are out of alignment in some way or another. And same is true for all the other planets. They all need to be respected in the way that we would respect a divine being, because they sort of are working through us, these powerful forces. So
this is fascinating. I think you could geek out on something like this for a very long time, right? So we have the mother, we have the father. What are some of the other archetypes?
Oh my gosh, there's so many archetypes. I mean, there's
some of the basics. There's like 5 basics, right?
Yeah, but specifically with astrology, there's going to be different ones, right?
Okay.
So I tend to use the Greco-Roman pantheon for most of the archetypal work that I do, because that's the ones that the planets are named after.
Oh, I
but
see.
There's something that I would love to share about that, actually, because this is pretty near and dear to my heart. I consider myself to be more of a feminist astrologer. And the reason why you can even be a feminist astrologer is if you look at, one, astrology was sort of developed in patriarchal societies. But when you look at the planets, they're almost exclusively named after male gods, right? So we have the moon, which is feminine in most cultures. And we have Venus, Aphrodite, you know, goddess of love. But if those are the only two that are not named after male gods. And so that kind of limits us to the expression of it's this kind of the Madonna whore complex idea, right? So she's either a mother figure or she's a sexual goddess being figure. And it was actually during the time of the feminist rights movement that we began discovering all the asteroids, and synchronistically they were named after goddesses. And so I use the asteroids a lot in the chart readings that I do for people, because they are other expressions of the divine feminine as we can embody them in our lives and in the world that there really hasn't been space made for in quite a long time in our society. So that's really, really important to me, is that we're honoring all aspects of the divine, including, you know, Pallas Athena, who is like the strategic wise goddess, including Ceres, who's the divine mother figure who has abundance, and including Vesta, who's the priestess, devotional archetype, you know. So I think it's really important that we bring those in as well.
All of those women are so strong and so powerful. If you were to give a list or a self-care recipe to nourish someone in that way, and we don't want to leave out the men right here. If you were going to create a superhuman, what would that list look like?
Okay, so daily routine practices that would cultivate a superhuman being.
Yeah.
Wow, that's such a...
What would you get? I know it's a hard question, and it's so expansive and it's so open. But the reason why I ask it on the podcast is because everyone has a little something different,
that they bring
and then
to
the
it.
listener can, you know, pick and choose what they want.
Yeah.
So
Interesting. Okay. I think...
You probably do this every day in your practice, really.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
it's interesting to kind of tease out in this way. I think the gift that I have to share around this is really about looking at life through the archetypal lens. So what stories are you living in your life right now? And it's good to have something that you can relate that back to, but then how could you maybe reframe that story or retell it in a different way? So that's actually a practice that I've done with clients, is seeing sort of which archetypal dynamics are already activated in you in your life at any given moment, right? So you might be having some sort of a life crisis or something coming up where you're already embodying a particular archetype, but actually claiming it and knowing that. And this is who I'm speaking from right now, right? So if you're a woman who's stepping into motherhood, so you're stepping into a Demeter time of your life. And so you're having to sort of grieve the loss of the maiden Persephone that you were before, and kind of entering into this new territory. So what would be the needs of a Demeter woman in that moment? And then how can you also kind of balance that? So ultimately, I think what a superhuman would really be is someone that can access any of these archetypes at any time, instead of being sort of like possessed by one. Because I really find that that's sort of what happens a lot, is we have a particular archetype within us that's activated, and then we sort of become slaves to what their needs and desires are. But the idea is that like us as the self can consciously choose at any moment where we want to be on the spectrum and who we want to activate and who really needs to come and show up in that situation for the best outcome that we're really looking for. So rather than just like going with whatever archetype is kind of coming through us at any moment, being able to have enough relationship with each of them within us that we could choose. And I don't know that I answered that in the way of like a
you
daily
definitely
practice.
did,
Exactly.
though. That's a moment to moment practice probably for some.
Yeah. That's a question I'm asking myself all the time, actually. I'm like, what goddess is wanting to come through me right now? And then like, what does she need? You know, because maybe she's trying to get it in a healthy or maybe an unhealthy way. So then how could I support that in some way?
I love this because you're really working with yourself on a super deep level. It sounds to me like this idea would be really forgiving and catching things before they evolve in a negative way. I think that this is beautiful. It's a very powerful idea for self-care recipe for certain.
Right. I mean, seeing ourselves as being made up of all of these gods and goddesses. And you don't say, no, you're wrong to a divine being. They have their own power, you know, and there's a need to have reverence and love for them, but maybe going about and getting it in a specific way versus another way, you know? So I think honoring all of the beings within us. That's why I say we're polytheistic, you know, we are made up of all of these divine beings, but they need to be heard and respected, even if we're not going to consciously choose to do what maybe they think they need at any given moment. They still need to be loved and listened to.
Before we leave today, I have a little special thing that I would like for us to do, if you're down to do it.
I'm excited.
So it's called the Wisdom for Healing cards. And what I do is I have every guest pull a card, and then they'll read it out loud to the listeners. And we'll see how it resonates with your message today.
Okay.
So you can do it in any way that you'd like. You can just visually look and pick one, or you can hand scan it like we did the Andaras earlier.
I think I'm going to shuffle a little bit.
Yeah, definitely shuffle, please. And while you're doing that, hopefully this will be healing sounds for you. I'm going to play the singing bowl, or my attempt at. And she's got one.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a beautiful card. Can you explain to the listeners what it looks like?
Yes. It's bring humor into your life. And it's this clown dancing, but he, she, I can't really tell the gender of the clown, but is holding the earth, the globe, in their hands and dancing around. I love that. So should I read it?
Yes, please.
Today's lesson. Think about whether you truly have a sense of humor. Healing is enhanced with humor, and laughter can lighten almost anything, certainly most day-to-day irritations. Your goal, to bring humor to everything that causes you stress, as this is one of the most empowered responses you can have. It just makes me want to laugh. I actually so strongly feel that way. You know, I've been kind of going through a challenging time in my life right now, and I know so clearly that it's always for the ultimate good. And I know that every challenge I face, I'm doing for the collective. And it's an opportunity for me to bring more of my own strength forward. But humor has absolutely been my medicine. So in this kind of challenging time, I've been watching so much stand-up comedy. Like that's what I've really been doing when I'm like alone in my quiet time at home, is I've been watching stand-up comedy, because it's the thing that I don't have to like it's not a whole storyline I have to follow. I don't have to give my whole attention to it, but I know that it'll bring some really good laughs. So I'm grateful for that. I think that's really good advice for me and maybe everyone right now, actually. So, yeah, kind of no matter what's going on in our personal lives or out in the world, one of the greatest gifts we can give. That's one of the things I love about comedians, really, is that, you know, the things that they tell jokes about are actually really serious matters, and they have this ability to create alchemy out of that. And the humor is where the healing comes from. We're able to touch into some very tender and painful and sensitive places in the collective and that people experience personally in a way that shines light in them. And brings a lightness and a levity to it that comedians make a lot of jokes about racism and sexism, and, you know, and it's like, it's not that they're making light of something that's serious. It's like, this is how we do the alchemy to heal it, you know? So I'm grateful for that. I've always it was funny. One of the questions that you sent me was, what's something that nobody knows about you? And I was thinking, that's actually incredibly hard for me to come up with. Almost impossible, because I'm pretty much just the most transparent, open book of a person. But I've been holding on to this one for a while, but I have a secret desire to do stand-up comedy.
Oh my gosh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, do it. You want to give our listeners a little something? No. Oh. I'm just saying, if you want to, here's the time.
I'm not ready for that just yet.
Okay,
No, I
okay.
mean, this is something that I've been holding really close to my heart. And I'm like, I really feel like this is something I would like
Do
to give a
it.
try to. So,
What's
yeah.
the funniest joke that you know?
Oh, that's pressure. I don't know. I don't know.
Okay.
Probably not anything that's appropriate to say on the podcast. I mean, I want to make jokes about the work that I do, really, honestly. So I've come up with some little jokes and some raps about Yoni eggs and stuff, but I don't think they're appropriate.
Oh my
on
God.
the podcast
I
right
totally
now.
want
Maybe
to
when
hear
we're
them.
offline. Yeah.
Please,
Okay.
please, if you've made a rap about Yoni eggs, please. Oh my God. I'm the first one to hear it.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much for making time to be here with us today, helping encourage others to get one step closer to aligning the mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional self. Actually, before we let the listeners go, I want to find out more about how to connect with you.
Sure.
Tell us about your social media outlets, or how people can get in touch with you, either for the mala beads, Yoni Yoga, for everything you're doing.
Sure,
Because there's a lot.
My website is goddessalchemist.com. That's where I have a lot of information on my retreats. So if people are interested in going on retreat with me, they can find info there. And then I'm on Facebook, Ourania Goddess Alchemist, and Instagram, Goddess_Alchemist. And that's probably where I live mostly online. So,
Thank you
yeah, come find me.
so much. You're awesome. Thanks seriously for taking time today. I've really appreciated it. And it's been quite fun.
Yeah.
So thank you, listeners, for tuning in. And until next time, I'm your host, Dr. Pepper Hernandez. Have a magical, wonderful day, and let's try to make this your very best year ever.
This episode has been brought to you by The Divine Feminine.